In the coldest inhabited place on Earth, temperatures fall to an impossible -71 degrees Celsius. Metal freezes, breath turns instantly to ice. Even sound struggles to travel through the frozen air. But here in the endless wilderness of Siberia, life still moves. 3,000 reindeer crossing the frozen tundra, led by one man who has survived this land his entire life. For thousands of years, the Yakut people have lived in this frozen wilderness. And for men like this nomad, survival depends on the herd. These animals are not just livestock. They are food, clothing, transport, and the only reason a human life can exist here at all. A herd this size is rare, even in Siberia. Nearly 3,000 reindeer, each one adapted to survive temperatures colder than Antarctica. Their thick winter coats trap heat. Their hooves cut through snow to reach the frozen moss beneath. But winter in Yakutia is never still. Storms arrive without warning, and when they do, temperatures fall fast. Tonight, the wind will push the cold below -71 degrees Celsius. In winter, food hides beneath half a meter of ice and snow. The herd must dig through frozen ground to find lichens, a plant that grows slowly in this Arctic desert. Without it, thousands of animals would starve before spring. As night falls, the nomad prepares for another frozen night. In this land, fire is life. Without it, a human body would freeze within minutes. But the herd is never alone in this wilderness. When storms come, predators follow. And tonight, wolves are moving through the blizzard. A single wolf cannot challenge a herd this size, but a pack can create chaos. The nomad must hold the animals together because panic could scatter thousands across the frozen wilderness. The wolves disappear into the storm, but the cold remains. In Yakutia, winter nights can last almost 20 hours, and the herd must keep moving to stay alive. By morning, the storm begins to fade. 3,000 reindeer still move across the frozen land, and the nomad continues forward, just as his ancestors did for centuries. In the coldest place on Earth, survival is not luck. It is tradition. The herd cannot remain in one place for long. Beneath this frozen world, food disappears quickly. To reach the next grazing ground, the nomad must guide 3,000 animals across a river locked under a meter of ice. If the ice breaks, hundreds could vanish into the freezing water within seconds. In Yakutia, experience means survival. The nomad listens carefully. The ice speaks, cracking and groaning beneath thousands of hooves. He knows the sound of safe ice and the sound of danger. Among the herd, not every animal is strong. A young calf struggles to keep up in the deep snow. At -71 degrees Celsius, weakness can mean death. A herd of this size moves like a living storm. 3,000 animals spreading across kilometers of tundra. But they must stay together. If even a fraction scatter, the nomad could lose them forever. Tonight, the nomad builds shelter. Not a permanent home, but a temporary refuge against the endless cold. Here in the Arctic wilderness, survival depends on simple skills passed down through generations. Food behaves differently in Yakutia. At -71 degrees Celsius, meat freezes instantly and can remain preserved for months. For the nomads, nature itself becomes the freezer. After a night of brutal cold, the tundra begins to glow. Winter sun slowly rises over Siberia, bringing only a few hours of light. But in this frozen world, even sunlight cannot warm the air. For the nomad, there is no final destination, only the rhythm of the herd. Winter pasture, spring migration, summer grazing. The cycle continues, year after year. In most places on Earth, life would surrender to temperatures like this. But here in Yakutia, life adapts. Reindeer, wolves, and humans. At -71 degrees Celsius, survival is more than endurance. It is knowledge, patience, and respect for the land. And as long as the herds continue to move across the Siberian tundra, the ancient life of the Yakut nomads will endure. Every step in the Arctic leaves a story behind. The snow records everything, wolves passing in the night, foxes hunting beneath the drifts, and the endless march of the reindeer herd. For the nomad, these tracks are the language of survival. Beneath the frozen tundra lies the herd's only winter food. Lichen, a slow-growing Arctic plant that survives where almost nothing else can. It takes decades to grow, but only seconds for thousands of hooves to uncover. The Nomad does not use maps. Instead, he carries the land in his memory. Every river crossing, every grazing ground, every safe shelter from the winter wind. Tonight, the temperature falls again. The thermometer drops below -71 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, exposed skin freezes in seconds. Even the reindeer struggle to conserve heat. But in Yakutia, cold is only half the danger. The wind can strip heat from the body faster than the cold itself. And tonight, the storm returns. Yet these animals are built for survival. Their thick coats trap warm air. Their wide hooves act like snowshoes. Together, they become one living shield against the cold. By morning, the storm begins to weaken. The tundra falls silent once again, and the herd begins to move. The Nomad learned these lands from his father, and his father learned from the generations before him. For centuries, the Yakut people have followed the same migration paths across this frozen world. From above, the herd becomes something extraordinary. 3,000 animals moving together, like a river of life flowing through the Arctic wilderness. At -71 degrees Celsius, survival here seems impossible. Yet for the nomads of Yakutia, this frozen land is home. And as long as the reindeer continue their journey across the tundra, the ancient rhythm of Arctic life will never disappear. In Yakutia, silence dominates the land. At -71 degrees Celsius, even sound seems to freeze in the air. The wind stops, the snow settles, and for a moment, the Arctic becomes perfectly still. The cold shapes everything here. Hair turns white with frost, breath becomes ice, and every movement demands energy from the body. But the reindeer are masters of this frozen world. Their instincts guide them to food buried beneath the snow and safe paths across the tundra. The herd has grazed this area long enough. Now the Nomad must guide them to new pastures dozens of kilometers away. In winter, migration never stops. Ahead lies the Siberian taiga, a forest frozen in time. Even here, where trees rise above the snow, the cold remains merciless. After hours of travel, the herd slows. Reindeer sink into the snow to rest, conserving energy for the long winter ahead. After hours of travel, the herd slows. Reindeer sink into the snow to rest, conserving energy for the long winter ahead. Every day, every storm, every frozen night, the Nomad protects his animals. Because the herd is the heart of his world, Yakutia stretches across millions of square kilometers. A wilderness so vast, a single herd can wander for months without meeting another human. The herd continues its journey, because in the Arctic, survival is movement. And the Nomad will guide them forward just as his ancestors did for centuries. In Yakutia, distance is difficult to judge. The horizon disappears into white sky and white snow. For travelers of the tundra, even direction can vanish. At -71 degrees Celsius, even tools can betray their owner. Metal becomes brittle, leather turns stiff, and machinery often refuses to start. Every Nomad carries a simple tool, a knife, used for food, repairs, and survival in the wilderness. Rivers in Yakutia freeze thick, but not always evenly. Under heavy snow, dangerous patches of thin ice can hide. Without warning, the weather changes again. Arctic squalls can appear within minutes, turning the open tundra into a storm. But thousands of years of evolution prepared these animals for exactly this moment. When the storm comes, the herd tightens, protecting the young and weak in the center. For the Nomad, this life is not extraordinary. It is simply the way his family has lived for generations, moving with the herd across the endless Arctic wilderness. In the long Arctic nights, stories replace the warmth of daylight. Stories of storms, migrations, and ancestors who survived even harsher winters. 3,000 animals, each step carving a path through the frozen world. Together, they form one of the last great migrations of the Arctic. Yakutia remains one of the coldest places on Earth. But for the Nomads and their reindeer, this frozen land is not an enemy. It is home,